We drove down into a dry riverbed called a wadi. There was a scattering of acacia trees that were all being eaten up by the Sahara. They had sand halfway up their trunks. And we drove down into this wadi, and there were about 50 mujahideen of various ages. The youngest was an 8-year-old with an AK-47, and the oldest was probably in his 60s. We drove in, there was a lot of excitement from Al-Qaeda. We were terrified. Al-Qaeda was screaming and shouting, guns were going off. The youngsters were looking at us as if they had gone to the zoo and were looking at some strange creature at the back of a cage. They were putting faces at us, spitting in the sand. We were pulled off the vehicle and dragged off to under our own small bush. And it was here we spent our first week in captivity. That afternoon, Al-Qaeda, they dragged a sheep out and slaughtered it about 10 meters away from us. And I had dual nationality at this stage. And I know that the British Americans, the Israelis, the French, and the Russians are probably the most hated by Al-Qaeda. And as they rolled the sheep over and they cut its throat, I sat there watching this, absolutely terrified, thinking that this was going to probably be this, I was going to have the same demise. 3 years prior to me, there was a British national called Edwin Dyer, who was beheaded by the same Al-Qaeda there in Mali. After they slaughtered this animal, they came over and began asking us questions. Who were we? Why were we in Mali? Were we married? Did we have children? Had we ever worked in the government? Were we spies? And once they had gathered this information, they then cuffed us and they placed us back under our bush, where we then, with time, drifted off to sleep. And the following morning, we made our first proof of life video. Al-Qaeda brought 2 vehicles together. They threw a tarp over it. They gave us pink and orange shirts with the idea of trying to, humiliate us. Just as Muslims being held in Guantanamo are being humiliated by being forced to wear orange jumpsuits, we too here were being humiliated by being forced to wear pink and orange t-shirts. It's me on the right in the pink, Shark, the Dutch national, in the middle, and then Johan on the left in the orange. Once we had made our proof of life, it was a message to our governments, pleading for our lives, and a message to our families. We were then taken back to under our small bush. And the 3 of us sat there discussing what had just taken place. And Johan turned to us and he said that he felt quite relieved because he thought that this first proof of life would be our first and our last. We would be executed, either shot in the back of the head or have our necks slit. And this was my introduction to Al-Qaeda. This was my first week there in the desert. And it was absolutely terrifying. You just think about us in the real world. We have questions, we jump on the internet, we phone a friend. For the next 5 years, 8 months, I had no information. And I realized, what did they want to do with me? Were they going to torture me? Were they going to kill me? I represented the sins of the entire Western world. Was I going to be kept underground in a bunker behind barbed wire, taken to Algeria, taken across to the Arab Spring in the Arab Peninsula? I had no idea. And I realized here that mental anxiety had a far greater impact on me than physical pain. Blood dries, bones heal, but until you are able to get your head around a difficult situation, that situation becomes your master. It leads you around by the name. You don't, by the nose. You don't sleep well. You are always anxious for the following day. It is absolutely imperative that in difficult times, we can understand, we can get control of our minds and understand our situation to try and make sense of what we're actually going through.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Debbie, pleasure. Thanks, Scott.